Canine officer dogs understand racism, and they know what racial slurs are. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. And, as someone who's personally owned, retired canine officer dogs, I wanted to, make a post to say that, these dogs are highly intelligent, but somewhere in their training, they have learned racial slurs, racial epithets, and to, in some cases, really read the body language of someone who is racist. I would probably get a retired officer dog, again, because they're super intelligent and very, very protective. But they can understand body language, aggression, but they can certainly understand racial epithets. And, as long as they're if they're on the side of protection, right? Because just as well as you can train a dog to protect, you can also train a dog to attack based on race as well. But as long as they're on the side of protection, they can be very protective, and they could read energy and say, "Hey, back up," just by simple racist statements or even racist actions, and become very vicious when they hear racial epithets as well. So when you see, videos like for the United Kingdom, the armed guardsmen with the horses and things like that, or even when you see like the police dogs and things like that, when they're attacking someone, just know that animals can be and are trained to understand racism, and they're highly intelligent. An animal's natural inclination, and I'm someone who's, been around animals most of my life. And an animal's natural inclination is to be open and caring and friendly towards everybody, unless they're like feral or something like that. But an animal that you raise is usually, they're open until you give them a reason to be distrusting. So when you see animals attack based on color, or they become especially vicious based on the race of their victim or things like that, that animal has been trained to do that. That is not something that comes to them naturally. But just as much as they are trained to attack, they can also be trained to defend and understand words and actions that are bad. And I've had animals there that were highly intelligent and can understand that. And sometimes, with enough, if they've been trained long enough, by the time they're retired, they've worked a long time. But a lot of times they can pick up on something that maybe you have not picked up on, which is when a person is dangerous or does not have good intentions towards you. So sometimes if they become incredibly defensive, or they don't like a particular person, and I'm not saying that this is all the time. There can certainly be exceptions. I'm just talking about like, canine officer dogs and things like that. But a lot of times they can pick up on something that perhaps you have not, because they've had years of training and experience and been around certain characters that are in jail. And so they can recognize words, they can recognize actions, and they could definitely read body language of people. And so they become very vicious out of nowhere. sometimes they're picking up, in a lot of cases, at least in my experience, they're picking up on something that you haven't quite picked up on, and they are defending you before you even know that you needed to be defended. So just something I wanted to put out there and let you guys know. This is something that's based off of my personal experience being around animals and having animals, gifted, and things like that from that were retired officers and things of that nature. So I hope this helps. Let me know what you think. Like, share, comment, and follow.